everyone, and thanks for joining today's Ask the Expert session on Power BI. My name is Bridget Rauch, and I'm a business intelligence consultant at Thorogood, and I'll be your MC for today's panel. Before we dive right into Power BI, I would like to give just a quick background for those of you who aren't familiar with Thorogood. So we are an independent professional services consulting firm specializing in business intelligence and analytics solutions. Thorogood provides a full range of services to support your business goals. From a Power BI perspective, we have helped our customers by developing requirement-driven tool evaluations, proof of concept initiatives, and large-scale implementations. We also provide customized user empowerment programs and develop BI roadmaps to help shape adoption of data-driven tools throughout your teams or your organization as a whole. We are independent in that we don't align with a single technology vendor. So we're talking about Microsoft and Power BI today, but we do work with a wide array of technology firms in the business intelligence market. These include back-end, front-end, and analytics-driven technologies. So with this independence, we are able to develop well-rounded expertise that allows us to help you and our clients integrate across platforms successfully. Focusing specifically on Microsoft, I've put together some of our credentials specific to these technologies. We've been a Microsoft Gold partner for over 10 years and are certified for data analytics, platform, and collaboration and content. In addition, we are a cloud platform certified partner. So our partnership gives us great interface into the Microsoft development team, allowing for open communication both from Microsoft directly to our customers and feedback from our customers back to the developers. So today we'll be focusing on features, applications, and integrations across all of Microsoft's Power BI offering. To get started, I'll cover two brief slides just to introduce the suite of products and get some of that terminology down that we'll use throughout. So Power BI Desktop is the locally installed tool, allowing you to connect to your data sources, create a data model, and create reports. These reports can then be published to the Power BI service, which is hosted in Microsoft's cloud, allowing for Power BI content to be shared across organizations. And finally, Power BI also offers a mobile application that allows you to view and interact with your data on the go. From a content perspective, there are three overarching components: data sets, which contain modeled data from one or more sources or queries; reports, which are built from a single data set; and dashboards, which contain tiles from any number of reports to combine all of your insights together. The data sets and reports can be built in the local desktop tool, so would be stored in your local PBIX files, while dashboards are strictly on the service. So you have data sets, reports, and dashboards published to your Power BI service. So with that general foundation, let's get right into some of the questions for the tool. And as I mentioned, feel free to add your own through that chat panel as we go. So I am Bridget Rauch. I'm joined today in our Philadelphia office by two of our Power BI experts, Jeff and Amanda. So I'll start by turning things over to you guys to introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Bridget. I'm Jeff Burke. I've been a consultant at Thorogood for 10 years. My background is primarily in BI and analytics architectures, including Microsoft software as well as the Azure cloud. My recent experience has been in integrating Power BI into our enterprise customers' architecture. And today I'll be talking about some of the architecture and integration options or questions on Power BI.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Quon. I'm also a BI&A consultant at Thorogood. My work has primarily been with the Microsoft end-to-end stack, and I have been working with Power BI with clients since it was in beta. So if any of you on the call do remember, this was back when Power BI was called Power BI Designer, ancient history at this point. So I've been working with clients using Power BI in terms of tool selection, proof of concepts, as well as full implementations. And I'm here as your panelist specific to the front-end tool aspects of Power BI, so Power BI Desktop and the online service.
All right, let's get started with just that, Amanda. We'll kick off with a few common questions that we've heard from a number of our customers. So to get started, the difference between desktop tool and the service, how do people use them differently, and what is the difference between them?
Yep, absolutely. Great question to start off with. In terms of Power BI Desktop, this is the tool, the locally installed tool on your computer that allows for report authoring, the cleaning and the mashing of those single or multiple data sources, the necessary transformations, the queries, et cetera. The online service, however, is really for content that is then published and shared for utilization by others. So the way we've seen clients or our customers use it, generally speaking, desktop is utilized by power users, for example, the ones that really understand the data and can do those mashups as necessary, whereas the online service is where you would share it for pretty much everyone else within your organization.
Great. All of that makes sense. Bit of a difference to see there. Going on to the next question. So if you have Power BI Desktop, you mentioned some of the uses for that, but the organization hasn't adopted Power BI Service yet. How can you get started with one or the other and really kick that off within your organization?
Yeah, it's a good question because since the Power BI Desktop client is free to download, a lot of people end up starting there, and then once they find good use cases for it, they kind of want to take on the service and introduce more of a collaboration experience within their organization. So firstly, anybody with a valid email address can go out and get started on the Power BI online service. While that may not be connected to everything within the organization, it's a good way to kind of get your feet wet with the technology and prove out any functionality that you're looking to cover on it. In terms of the kind of enterprise adoption side of things, there's really kind of two angles that we help customers with to be able to bring that to the enterprise. One is that single sign-on experience for users, something that's very much mainstream with all the applications people are using. And to do that, there's a synchronization that needs to happen with logins to get that smooth experience. The other side of it is kind of enterprise data source integration. A lot of those enterprise data sources are found on-premise, and one of the advantages of Power BI is to be able to integrate those data sources. So that's something that we work on with customers as well. I would say just in general, like any BI project that we're working on with our customers, we do advise that we have a nice, good business case for the adoption of the service, because when you start looking at some of that enterprise functionality, you may very well need to collaborate with other groups within your organizations to be able to get the technology set up on it. This is also something that Thorogood helps with as well, everything from refining the kind of business value drivers of Power BI, the collaboration within internal teams, whether those are technology teams, information security teams, et cetera, as well as the actual technology implementation side of things to get the Power BI service launched within an organization.
A lot to cover there, but all good points. So you mentioned some of those organizational and enterprise-wide capabilities. So one of the many questions that we get is, what really is a pro license? What comes with that? And who needs it, really?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. In terms of the pro license, you can group the features you get with it into two kinds of buckets. The first bucket refers to the types of data that you are allowed to access with the pro license. So any data sets or reports or dashboards that utilize data sets that include some kind of refreshable data. So this includes any data set that uses, say, the Power BI Data Gateway, a data set that's refreshed more than once per day, any live connections, so if you have a direct query to an underlying data source, things like that. On the other side of things, in the secondary bucket, the pro license allows you to view and share any content in a content pack or a group. Content pack specifically for say, a single power user to author some kind of data set and push it out to a team of users so that they can leverage it themselves to make their own customizable content off of that data set. Whereas groups are more for a collaborative group of analysts, for example, wherein a data set, report, and or dashboard can actually be edited by all the users and members within that group.
So a question coming off of that one, if you don't have that pro license, does that mean that you can't share any of your content?
So there are different aspects to sharing. If you don't have a pro license, what you can do at the very basic level is share a dashboard. When sharing a dashboard, that allows the recipients of the share to be able to view the different tiles in the dashboard, and they can actually be drilled through to the underlying data source. So if you have a tile that's connected to a report and they select the tile, they can see that underlying report. However, they can't make any edits or changes to that dashboard. They only have that view capability.
And Amanda, just a follow-up question on it. In terms of the customers that you've worked on with it, do you see people, a lot of people going for that pro license, or do people mostly make use of the free one?
Yeah, so it really depends on the types of users that you have in your organization, whether it's if you have like a large group of power users or the specific requirements for the reporting as necessary. So generally speaking, what we've been seeing on clients is, especially from a self-service perspective, you want the ability to share and collaborate in that sense. So if you do have a group of power users or even a single power user in a team that wants to be able to collect feedback from others in that team and edit things as necessary, the real enterprise feature in the sharing and collaboration of content packs and groups is really key in that regard. Also, when you're thinking about kind of these enterprise organizations that have large data sets with many millions, billions of rows, things that would require a live connection, then pro licenses are fairly necessary if you would like your end users to be able to utilize those data sets and dashboards.
Yeah, all of that makes a lot of sense. So with sharing, another question that we've had come in specifically with on-prem sharing, what are some of the options there?
Yeah, so primarily the intention is to use Power BI Desktop with the Power BI Online service, but for any number of reasons, organizations may want to explore the possibility of doing on-prem sharing. So I'll go through, there are 3 or 4 different options for doing that, and I'll go through them here. Firstly, the PBIX files associated with the Power BI Desktop tool are just any other file, so you could do some simple collaboration, such as on things like a file share, pretty basic collaboration, just file sharing at that point. Another option for it would be collaboration portals such as SharePoint. And again, there it's kind of your basic collaboration functionality. Even with SharePoint on-premise, there isn't that Power BI service capability in terms of doing things like dashboards or in-browser rendering. It's really just a collaboration and file share at that point. Reporting services, particularly the 2016 version, also has the ability to host PBIX files within that report manager interface. And in the current version, it is really just a file share capability, so people can download the PBIX files, open them in the desktop tool. What we are seeing is in the new version of SQL Server that's due out in the middle of 2017, we are expecting improved functionality there. So there is a technical preview out, and we do have some videos out on the website that demonstrate some of that functionality, including in-browser rendering and browser authoring. It may not be the full Power BI Online service experience, such as the experience with dashboards and Q&A and some of that functionality, but we are expecting quite a bit more functionality from that perspective. And just one other point that deserves a mention here is that there is a third-party tool with Pyramid Analytics that has a strong alliance with Microsoft, and it does offer some other on-premise functionality that is worth exploration, particularly if you need on-premise Power BI collaboration before the next version of SQL Server is available.
And just to follow that up and clarify, if you do have an on-premise data source like SQL Server but don't necessarily need to keep your data there, is there an option to connect and pull your data out to, say, store locally in a PBIX file?
Yes, I think so. The question is being able to, if you have on-premise data sources, to be able to extract that data into a Power BI desktop file.
Right, without the need for a gateway or some of those pro features that Amanda went through.
Yeah, so that's a possibility. It will really depend on the requirements and things like data volumes and complexity. So a lot of our enterprise customers do have requirements that may take them beyond that from a data volume perspective, but certainly for specific use cases, that is a possibility to bring data into the PBIX desktop tool and collaborate on it either on-premise or in the Power BI online service at that point.
Great, and then that would give you the capabilities within the desktop tool to be able to use some of that data modeling capability and publish those stored data sets.
Yeah.
Great. So with that one, moving to our next question here, once you have that data set formed in your local Power BI desktop folder and you publish that to service, how do you make changes to that?
Right. So if you're thinking about making changes after it's been published to service and you're looking to change it in service, you can't. The changes for data sets in particular have to be done within the Power BI desktop tool. So Power BI desktop allows you to take multiple data sources, multiple queries, for example, and allow you to do the mashup, the cleansing, et cetera, to then publish to the Power BI online service. Now, say you have an existing data set that you have authored that takes, say, Salesforce and a local Excel file with targets, and your targets have been updated. What you can do, or you want to include a new data source, for example, what you can do is reopen that data set within your Power BI desktop tool, make the edits as necessary, and then republish that data set to the online service. So whomever that you have shared that data set with will see the updates from there.
Makes sense. And with updates from a different side of things. So a question that I know I've been asked many times from multiple customers. So updates to the desktop tool, they happen very regularly. Microsoft's always coming out with these updates to the tool and the new releases. How do our customers keep on top of them and approach having those updates pushed?
Yeah, sure. So this has come up at a number of customer scenarios, and while it's very valuable to have a rapidly evolving product, it does create some challenges for kind of software management roles within the organizations. In terms of what people do and what some of the options are, one option that's not always an option depending on the organization, but is to allow either a subset or the group of users to be able to install their own software. And that's, Microsoft does a pretty good job of notifying you when new updates are available or when you're opening up a Power BI desktop workbook that needs to be upgraded. However, that's not always a possibility due to some of the regulations and making sure that things like viruses and the like aren't spread through an organization. A lot of organizations use some sort of software management, including things like System Center from Microsoft. And what we see with that is a couple of different things. Sometimes an organization will keep up on the monthly release cadence and be able to distribute software, packaged software on a monthly release cycle. Others kind of back off that and do it once a quarter, and then even others just do it as needed when there's a particular piece of functionality that's been released, particularly in the early stages as the user group for Power BI may be relatively small within an organization. Depending on exactly what makes sense for the customer organizations, they'll normally pick one of those options. Bridge, I saw a question come through in the panel here that I wanted to pick up on as well, and it's one that we've covered off in one of our roadmaps. So the question here is what is the security model within Power BI at the enterprise level, considering it is a software as a service? Is that public cloud, and what are the options available there? So yes, it is. The Power BI service is a public cloud, and it is a shared environment that, as a result. Microsoft does do a good job of putting forward documentation on kind of what the encryption levels are, both of or all three, data that is being stored, data that's in transit, and data that's being processed. And it does call on kind of central platform as a service components in the underlying architecture, and we can send through some URLs and things that describe exactly what that security looks like. The other option, of course, which is fairly common at our enterprise customers, is to use the enterprise gateway and to do live connections either back to on-premise data sources or even within a secure Azure environment. To ensure that that data that's being stored in those repositories is kind of meeting corporate standards. So that is a topic that we explore based on people's information security requirements and talk through that with different organizations. But we can send around some URLs and things on some documentation that help us support them and facilitate those conversations.
Great. Well, that sounds good. We have a number of questions coming through about some of those mobile capabilities, so I'll jump over to those. So the first one that's come through is there a need to duplicate a workbook to create a mobile version of those reports?
No, and that's why Power BI Desktop is awesome. So presumably the usage of workbook here refers to a Power BI desktop file, so that PBIX. And in that case, no, you do not need to create a duplicate PBIX if you want it to be rendered most efficiently for mobile use. What you can do in Power BI Desktop itself is when you create the report, that's usually that 16:9 or 4:3 ratio. There is a selection in the top ribbon itself to see what it would look like on a mobile phone in portrait view. And what you can do is drag and drop the different aspects of the report, so the different visuals, so you can determine what would look best when rendering on a mobile device. All that's done within the same PBIX report, so then when you publish it to service and then view it on your mobile phone, when you're in portrait view, you'll be able to see that specific mobile reporting view that you've created, and then when you switch over to landscape, you'll see that full 16:9 or 4:3 ratio that was originally created. Now, outside of the workbook mobile solution, there are, when you publish to Power BI Online service, there's the dashboarding view, and dashboards themselves are tiles, but what you can do in service as well is edit the arrangement of those tiles when you're viewing it on mobile. So similar idea, but specific to the online service. You log into app.powerbi.com, go to that given dashboard, and then you can rearrange the tiles as you see necessary for that mobile rendering.
Sounds good. You covered a number of questions there. So another one that's a great one, I've seen questions with a lot of this about connecting to data based on your data source. So combining a few ones here, the question being, if you're connecting to hundreds of millions of rows of fact data, what's the best way to approach that? And on the other side, are there limits to things like the gateway and what can be cached?
Right, so this is something that comes up at our enterprise customers quite a bit, not just in relation to Power BI, but across the board. And one thing I would say is exploring the use of bringing the data into some sort of cached repository from a performance perspective. I'll make the assumption here that the volumes of data kind of go beyond the limits of doing that practically. Typically what we would advise in this is to do some sort of direct query or live connection back to the relational or back to the database that stores the millions of rows of data. And that may very well present some challenges in terms of functionality or performance. And some of the things that we look at in the end-to-end architecture to help mitigate some of those potential challenges is one, the end-to-end optimization. So looking at something like Power BI and what the behaviors are within Power BI and how that influences the queries that go back to those hundreds of millions of rows, such that we can physically optimize them in what will probably be a pretty powerful data repository for those millions of rows. The other thing is around caching and whether we can cache that data either in the Power BI structures by bringing it into a data set or using something like analysis services that has quite a bit of compression as well as enterprise functionality on it. And if it's not possible to necessarily cache all that detailed information, we do explore options on the front-end tools, including Power BI, to either cache certain summaries of the information or certain segments of the information, and then use the reporting tools to guide people to more specific data sets that are in fact performing in the ways that we want to get them to go. In terms of the limits from the gateway, there aren't any limits necessarily about the throughput. There will be kind of practical limits around that, and that's something that we would look to, again, across the end-to-end experience as well as the kind of user behaviors and ensuring that they're using the tools in a way that respects the data volumes.
So just a couple more questions here, or a couple more minutes here, but we have a few more questions we should be able to get through. So a few quick ones. So how does data get refreshed? I think both of you have touched on it a little bit, but how does that work? How do you set that up?
That's pretty high level. Though this was kind of in response to a previous question where I was talking about changing data and service. So, for example, if you had a sales data set that was, say your sales data resided in Excel, you might have the data gateway, whether personal or enterprise, set up on your laptop. And when you publish your sales data set and the overarching reports and dashboards on top of that to the online service, you can set up that refresh schedule to happen daily or more than once a day, so long as you update that underlying Excel report. Say, for example, instead you created a report on top of Salesforce. There does exist an actual Salesforce connector that would allow you to, without requiring any kind of enterprise data gateway setup, allow you to refresh on a schedule. So I personally created a Salesforce report that updates every Monday at 10 a.m., and it didn't require an enterprise data gateway in that sense. So there are a number of connectors available within Power BI Desktop. I think it's over 100 or something to that effect. That allow you to do some of those refreshes. So it really depends on the particular data source that you're looking at.
All right, just about out of time here. So one more high-level question. I think it'll go towards you, Amanda. So a question, we've had a lot of questions come through about comparing to some other technologies, but the main question here is how mature is Power BI as a BI tool in this space?
Yeah, so just staring at the chat pane, there are quite a number of questions kind of around this, and we do, in fact, hear the question a lot. So the monthly updates to Power BI, both desktop and online, it's really been key in driving Power BI to be one of the leaders in the overall BI reporting space. Now, the question does tend to come up with customers when they're thinking about, say, tool selection for a given initiative. But at the end of the day, determining whether Power BI or another tool is best for you and your organization really dependent on a lot of things, but boils down to your requirements. So we've done these tool selection exercises with a number of our customers, but it depends on really what you need, and it's important to be aligned with that. Now, mind you, it's also not the be-all, end-all, right? So we've seen Power BI alongside a lot of other technologies at our customers. So even if someone isn't using Power BI exclusively, we are seeing Power BI in combination and in conjunction with other tools because it does have a compelling value proposition and it is evolving rapidly.
Makes sense. Sounds like one of those it depends answers.
Yes.
All right, we are just about out of time here, and I know we've covered quite a bit, but one thing we've only really started to touch on is determining next steps for your organization, and very much to Amanda's last point there, every organization is different. Thorogood, however, can help in a variety of capacities, whether you're just getting started with Power BI, planning your first large-scale implementation, or if you're well on way to becoming an expert yourself. So due to our independence from any specific technology, we can help with your BI initiatives across your tools, offering unique expertise and perspectives. So I know we have a number of questions that we'll need to follow up on that we weren't able to get to today. So we'll definitely be reaching out to all of you individually, but also please do reach out if you're looking for any help with any aspects of your architecture. So I'd like to thank you all for joining today. I do hope that you found the session useful. If you do have any more questions that you haven't yet added to the chat pane, please do reach out to any one of us, and we'd be happy to speak with you and work with you on any of those BI challenges.